This is the Ordinary Badass podcast with me, Atane O'Kane. In this episode, I talked to Scott Riley about chronic illness and depression, the Wim Hof Method, and creating community. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the Ordinary Badass podcast. Today, I am talking with Scott Riley, who has would you call it a personal development business, or what would you actually call it, Scott?
Yeah, I generally go for health coaching because I think most people can relate to that, but I think probably personal development's more on the button with what I'm doing. Yeah.
Personal development and health coaching called Causeway Living here in Northern Ireland. And we met because I attended one of Scott's workshops in December of last year. So we actually don't know each other very well. But I have been following his online presence and trying to kind of help support the stuff that he's doing because I think it's absolutely fabulous. And so I asked you, Scott, to talk to me today because even though we don't know each other very well, I think we have a lot in common. And I thought it would be good to share that with people who are listening to the podcast. So You're very welcome. And thank you for meeting up with me today.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful for you to maybe give a little introduction yourself in terms of what Causeway Living is, or, you know, who you are and how you got to what you're doing now?
Yeah, no problem. Probably a good point for everyone listening, as they probably know you very well, to relate to our experience. So we met in one of my Wim Hof Method workshops here in Northern Ireland. And for anyone who doesn't know, the Wim Hof Method, again, it's another thing that's really hard to put into a nutshell. It's a personal development tool as well, but the way that I find that most people can relate to it is like a nervous system training or stress management training. And it has three pillars to it. So breath work and mindset training. And then the almost unique point of it is the cold. So you have been in my ice bath. And even though we might know each other that well, I think you get to connect to somebody on some kind of deeper level once you've been done the ice bath together.
Yep.
So, we may not know the surface level things too well, but we know who each other are. And yeah, it's great. It's an amazing self-development tool for people who, like myself a long time ago, was very unwell, or people who are very fit and healthy and high performers. And I think I can speak to that through my own experiences, like I mentioned, being very unwell and being a reasonably fit and healthy person now, and still getting a lot out of the Wim Hof Method throughout that whole journey. So I guess it'd probably be useful to touch on that journey as well, and let the people listening know that whenever I say I was a little bit unwell, I'm probably it's a bit of an understatement. I was suffering from a chronic illness about 4.5 years. Getting towards 5 years ago now. It was rheumatoid arthritis. So that's an autoimmune disorder. And an autoimmune disorder, for if anyone doesn't know, is when your immune system starts attacking your own body, and they come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes. So for me, I was suffering from rheumatoid arthritis, which was chronic inflammation in the joints, but other people end up with things like Crohn's disease, which is inflammation of the gut, or psoriasis type of conditions, which is like inflammation in the skin. And they are chronic illnesses as well, which basically means once you get them, you're kind of supposed to have them pretty much for keeps. And I'm very fortunate to say that through some experiences, maybe we'll touch on today, that I am now a good 4.5 years, no symptoms, no medication, not suffering from the condition, managed to lose a good 7 stone in that time, 100 pounds. And just generally be a whole lot happier and healthier and stronger. And even though life still has its lots of ups and downs, and it's certainly by no means the picture perfect social media thing that somebody might get the impression of sometimes when they see all the cool pictures of, handstands and jumping into rivers in the mountains. And, it's certainly a lot better than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And I think I'm better. The quality of the challenges I've got now are a lot better than the quality of the challenges I had whenever I was unwell.
Yeah. And I was having this conversation in the last episode with Michelle Major. Both of us kind of had to hit rock bottom. We had to be broken by the circumstances of our lives to really get serious about finding things that worked for us. And it sounds like you went through a similar process. But by the time we're ready to teach others, we have done that work. And I think we can kind of portray ourselves as being these very together, very confident, always effervescent, showing up people, when behind the scenes, quite often, it takes a real tragedy or pain or loss or illness to kickstart things. So when you were that person, what was that like, living with chronic pain and feeling like you had been essentially told this is you for life?
As you can probably imagine, with my physical health that bad, my mental health was terrible as well. I still find this really hard to even say out loud, but it was to the point of just not wanting to wake up the next morning. Like I was looking at it, because that condition's chronic but not terminal. You're kind of looking at, and I was quite young when I was diagnosed as well. So I was thinking, okay, well, here's maybe like 40 or 50 years that I have to live in extreme pain. Like I was, to open a door handle would have been sore in my hands, or brushing my teeth. Going up and down a flight of stairs was extremely painful on my knees. And I just, I would hardly get off the sofa. And it was kind of no wonder I put on so much weight. And I allowed myself to get extremely isolated as well, because yourself, whenever you're feeling sore or you just feel miserable, you don't want to be around people.
Right.
And I was going to the shop at near midnight whenever I knew that no one would be there, and come home. I would see maybe my family like once a week, and that was about it. And thankfully for those amazing computers we've got now, the self-service tills, you can go through life without seeing anyone, I found. So I don't know how much of a good thing that really is. But I allowed myself to get really isolated, and which only made my mental health worse, which I'm certain had a negative impact on the physical health.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just in hindsight, a big demonstration about how life just seems to run on momentum, that you do one thing goes wrong, that's very easily to allow that to impact the next thing that has a negative impact on the original thing, and it just snowballs. Conversely, on the other side of that, I find the opposite's true. You start doing small good things for yourself, and it makes the next good thing you do for yourself easier. And you can use the same principle to get you out of that state probably a lot quicker than most people would assume. So that's a big part of my journey, really, just understanding that something that seems maybe small and insignificant can have a pretty drastic effect if you just stay consistent with it, because you never know what that might lead to, the next positive thing and the next. And all of a sudden you're getting up early and you're making your bed in the morning, and you're going out for a walk and you're eating better, and all of a sudden you realize that, oh wow, I've got a month now, and I haven't had the physical pains that I was having. And that said, though, as much as I do believe it's all about the small things, I have done some pretty extreme things on my journey to get my health back as well. So there's room for it all in there. Everyone's got a different journey.
So we'll start with the small things, and then I'll ask you about the big things. What was the beginning? What were those small things that created the momentum to actually change and get yourself out of the situation you were in?
So the smallest thing was, it kind of goes hand in hand with a really big thing. So the initial thing that I did to get my health back was started a juice fast. It was a really long juice fast, so it was 60 days. So that's the big thing.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
2 months without solid food. So that's definitely not a small thing.
Yeah, that sounds pretty big.
Yeah. However, one of the best small things that I did alongside that was doing whatever physical activity I could each day. Like, and literally initially it was like 10 minutes walk. It was like go down to the bottom of the stairs of my, first floor apartment, walk down the street for like 5 minutes, feel really sore, like they hurt my knees, come back, and every single day, every day without fail, Spartan strict, go out and just do what I could each day. And all of a sudden, like by the end of the first week, it might have been like a 20-minute walk. And then by the end of 4 weeks, it was out walking around the block for an hour.
Mhm.
And, those gradual small things all the time. And not that I really thought about it this way at the time or really realized what I was doing, but time outdoors as well. It was
Mm. Bit of fresh
not
air
just,
and
yeah,
yeah, getting out of the same four walls.
100% moving your physical space to change your mental space as well.
Yeah.
And so without really, maybe just intuitively acting, moving my body, getting outside, doing what little I could each day. And sometimes I think people won't take that action because it seems so small that it almost seems beneath them. So, I could have at some point, if someone said to me, like, just go out for a walk for 10 minutes, I know it's all you're capable of right now, but you don't know what it
Mm.
might lead to. I could have easily, because I can put myself back in that mindset, could have thought, what's the point? It's only 10 minutes. What's that going to do?
Right.
And I think whenever most people like, even if they're not in a situation maybe as negative as I was, if they're wanting to improve their life circumstances, maybe sometimes they're not aiming low enough, which seems like a strange thing to say. But
Yeah.
because like it's not beneath you, like if you're
Mm.
not doing 10 minutes walk each day to go out
Hmm.
and do that, you're not making your bed in the morning, just do that. It's not beneath you to do a small thing.
Yeah, I think what
Aim.
happens is we get into a situation that's just awful, right? And then we start fantasizing about the complete opposite of that, right?
Mhm.
So quite often, one of the things I do with my clients when I first meet them is say, if I could wave a magic wand and transport you a year ahead, and there was no limits, what would your life look like, right?
Mhm.
And they tell you, oh well, I would love to be doing this, and then very quickly go, but
Yeah.
that's never going to happen, right? Because their aspirations are here and their experience is here, and so like making that small step just seems pointless.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it does take, and truthfully, I think it's only through story and seeing other, like, anecdotal evidence was massive for me to have the motivation to do things like that. It's so hard to, like you said, whenever you've got an aspiration that's way up high and all you can really, you've got to lower yourself to do the small things to get there. It's very hard unless you have someone to look up to, or anecdotal evidence. Like I said, like I watched a couple of really good documentaries and related to the juice fasting. One was called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds really grim, but it's a really uplifting documentary about an Australian guy who also did a 60-day juice fast and managed to get better. And in that, and then another juice fasting documentary I watched called Super Juice Me. It had a lot of people who I could really easily relate to, chronically ill and in many cases very overweight. And they were getting them to do like basic things. There was, in particular, I'm thinking now of the Super Juice Me documentary. They took a bunch of people who were quite unwell to a retreat center where they put them on a 28-day fast. And they would get them doing a little bit of movement each day as well, which is something I took from that. And there was just, I remember one guy in particular, like he'd be really struggling just to go and like walking in the hills there, but he was doing it. And ultimately it led to him getting a lot better. So whenever you have that story and you can see like, well, it worked for this guy, then
yeah, and you got to
helping.
see his journey. You didn't just see him at the end looking fabulous. And yeah, you got to see the pain and the struggle so then it became more accessible in a way.
Yeah, I think that's super important, and something I really try my best to, um, in terms of like social media, it can be really misleading, and it's a big part of any business nowadays, but in particular with what I'm doing with, health coaching, or, as you said, even personal development. It's it's almost the only means of getting your business out there. And I'm obviously sharing a lot of the experiences in the present with the workshops and other people's stories, but I really try and, consciously put reminders in now and again that this was a journey. If you see, if you're seeing the handstand or whatever, don't, or the arm balance or some sort of picture that looks really cool, remember that it's the big fat sick guy a couple of years doing that, that it's not like just present day me, that's something that in a really realistically a relatively short amount of time is all kind of attainable. But it all took those small steps along the way, and having conversations like this, as well, where people don't just look at the picture and think, oh, well, it's easy for that guy or easy for her, or they realize like, oh, okay, it's been a journey. And if that big fat sick guy who was really unwell and mentally in a bad place a few years ago can do all this, then maybe I can as well.
Yeah. It makes me think of, the kind of the power aerobics gurus of the 90s. A lot of them kind of capitalized on that, like Richard Simmons, and Susan Powter was another one, where she showed the pictures of her being the big fat sick girl, and then showed up as she was now, and it was like, if I can do this, you have no excuses, just get your ass off the couch and do this with me for 5 minutes. Yeah, it works. But yeah, I think it's always a balance, isn't it? Because you want people to be excited and inspired by what you're doing now, but also want to keep it accessible so it doesn't look like it's some kind of crazy dream that people can't relate to.
Very much so. And then I guess part of what I'm doing, and I know part of what you're doing from the conversations we've had, is then making that as easy as possible for people to embody or make part of their own lives as well. And I think the best way, and I know from my own experience at least anyway, the best way is through community to make that happen, to make it normal,
right?
So that you're not looking at one story and this one, woman or man online that has done an amazing thing, that you're surrounded by people just doing all those good things anyway. And that's it's almost like having that culture around you.
Yeah, and you seem to have really successfully done that with your dash and splash.
It's taken off amazingly, which is very exciting.
Maybe you could explain a little bit to the people who are listening who have no idea what this is, what you've created, this amazing thing you've created.
Yeah, it's really exciting. So as I mentioned, becoming a Wim Hof Method instructor, I'm very passionate about the amazing health benefits that you can get from the cold water. And in Ireland, we have an abundance of cold water around us, so we're very fortunate in that way, in the sea and being an island nation. And I was going outdoor activity as well. I mentioned is really important to me, even like right back to day one of my journey. It was just going out for a walk outside. And as my fitness levels improved gradually, I took just to jogging, outside as well. And I was regularly going just for a jog along the coast and getting into the sea afterwards, and feeling amazing for this, and felt that other people might want to join me. So initially it was just on my Causeway living page. I decided to put out a free event. I was going for a run and a swim anyway. and wanted to see if anyone wanted to join me. Put those two elements together, the run, dash, and the jump in the sea, splash. And I had no idea what to really expect. Like, I thought maybe, if we get half a dozen people turn up, that would be pretty impressive. This was, it would have been a year and a half ago, around end of September, start of October, maybe. So starting to get like into autumn, chilly enough, and I really no idea what to expect. The first week there was probably between maybe about 12 to 15 people turned up, so it was pretty impressed, to be honest, and I thought, like, this is amazing that all these people want to join me in what most people even now still call fairly crazy activity, running along the coast and jumping in the sea. But even since then, like, it's just grown steadily. And last week in particular, there must have been about 70 people on the beach getting in for a swim after being out for a run or walk. Like some people do go down, and a big part of it for me was making it as accessible to as many people as possible. So instead of it's a 30-minute jog or walk, but it's like 15 minutes down the coast and 15 minutes back again. So there's not a set distance. So if someone is incapable of running, I just encourage them, like I did way back at the start of my journey, just to go walk 15 minutes down the coast and 15 minutes back again. We all get changed into swim stuff, get into the sea, and then have a big hangout in the cafe nearby afterwards as well. So really brings that community element in. And the most exciting thing is to see just how much people buy into it. Like, they'll go down swimming during the week. There's a big Dash and Splash Facebook group where if somebody's free, they'll say, who's up for joining me and going for a swim or going for a run. And generally there's always, I think there's about 600 people in the group now, which is mad. And
amazing.
There's always someone there to go out and go for a run and go for a swim and feel like it's normal, and it's just part of their lives and a little part of the culture of Bangor now in Northern Ireland, which is crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, it's obviously filling a need that people have, and trying to do that kind of stuff in isolation is really, you can only go for so long, and then it's really hard to keep up your momentum. But when you have 600 friends to call on, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, and it makes it normal. I think sometimes people feel, even if you always wanted to go for a swim, because a lot of people had actually said that to me whenever they turned up, especially near the start. So the early adopters might have said to me something like, you know what, I wanted to do that for ages, and I've never had the guts just to go on my own and have people look at me. And I guess it just takes sometimes one crazy person who doesn't really care that much about people looking at them it's almost a weird way to say it, but make you feel like you have permission to do it as well.
Right. Yeah.
And then once it becomes normalized, then it takes some of the stigma away. And then you're even doing stuff for yourself that you don't even realize. Not that it's a main focus of it, but people, I guess, are getting benefits from it, like getting out of their comfort zone, just being in a swimsuit or swimming trunks on a beach on a Sunday morning in Bangor, like a pretty conservative small little town. And it's great, and to get this whole idea of the perfect body that you would see on Instagram all the time out of your head, that you're standing there with 70 people of all different shapes and sizes. And I think it's a really healthy thing to, even if you're paying no attention to that, it's definitely having an impact on your subconscious, that otherwise all your subconscious is ever seeing is perfect bodies on media.
Right.
Whereas if at least once a week your subconscious is getting hit by real bodies, you might it might impact how you see yourself for the positive.
And I think this connects really well with I've noticed in your posts you use the hashtag not a cult quite often.
Yeah, that's the official hashtag.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I am part of a community of people who practice radical honesty, and we also say we're not a cult. And we're used to being a cult-like in some ways, because I think for the very same reason, because radical honesty. So I started a radical honesty group back in 2010, I think 2011 in Belfast. And like you, I just wanted to be real with people. I was sick of performing and pretending and caring about what people thought about me. And I went and did this radical honesty training, and I got to spend time with people who were just being themselves and admitting when they were messed up, and being really honest about their fears and their hopes and their dark secrets and their sexual attractions and their shame about money. And it was like, oh, this is such a relief. And when you're in an environment where people are just being real and are taking chances and are stepping out of their comfort zone, you fall in love with each other really quickly, right? Because you're like, I see you, you are me, you know, we're bonded now. And it also gives you that feedback. Oh, it's not just me. Everybody else is fucked up too. Everybody else is secretly thinking the same thing I am. Everybody else is secretly pretending to be something that they're not. Phew, ooh, these people I can be myself with. And there's something really powerful about that. So when I came home, I set up a meetup group, and I thought, like you, I thought if I get 6 people in the room, I'll be delighted. And by the time I was wrapping up the group, there was over 50 people in the group.
Amazing.
And I thought, people in Northern Ireland don't want to tell the truth. It's not something we're used to culturally. It's not something that's encouraged. And people are going to be terrified by it. But people were actually like, please let me join this group. I am so sick of living in a world where everybody's fake, and I'm so insecure, and I hate my job, and I hate my life, and I don't know what to do about it. And then you get into an environment where everybody's being real, and you do become kind of cult-like. You start to have your own language and your own kind of little inside jokes and your own, and yeah, from the outside, it looks crazy. Like, and we do workshops in Greece every year, and it's in an intentional community where there are people living there, doing like vegan cooking classes and nice soft things. And then there's this group of people shouting, I fucking resent you for blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, like really expressing their emotions in the moment. And it looks weird. It looks crazy, and it looks a little bit culty. And so every time I see your hashtag, I laugh a little. And I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of people who are in the radical honesty community are big fans of Wim Hof.
Yeah, there's a few things there that I think tie them really well. So the first thing I think is, whenever you get, it's like a kind of a hack of human nature, is if you take someone out of their comfort zone and into perceived danger, so into the fight or flight part of the nervous system as a group, and take them all through the other side safely, there's like an innate bonding trigger that happens there. The most extreme example of that was talked about in a book called Tribe by Sebastian Juncker. He's the example. He was a war correspondent, and obviously in war is the most extreme example of that. Like, military people are bonded to the point where they feel like family and brothers, and they're going into literal life or death circumstances, coming through the other side and feeling probably closer than their partner or their parents. And not that we necessarily have to go to that extreme, but the cold, at least in my experience, is a really good, reliable, safe way to put people into, because it is literally tricking your body into thinking that it's life or death. Because if you stayed into the cold, it's dangerous too long. So by taking a big group of people and putting them into the cold water and triggering the fight or flight response and bringing them out through the other side, it's a huge bonding thing that people come through safely. And then, apart from the bonding side, it makes people real as well. It strips back so many layers that all of a sudden, like, after being in the sea and when everyone's sitting around in the cafe afterwards, like, people are talking about real stuff. That it's not about like, oh, did you see what happened on the news, or all that stuff that actually has no real impact on your day-to-day life. About it's just a load of rubbish. Like, what really impacts you in your day to day is like relationships and how you're actually feeling, and people will open up and talk about that stuff in a really honest way that I don't know if it's like intentional. I just think they're doing it because they they feel open to do so. And maybe there's something to what you said as well about, being stripped back to, you can see that you're just all the same.
Yeah.
And then it allows you to open up in a way that you don't feel judged. I think it's one of the best things you can ever give another person, is the space for them to be themselves.
Yeah.
And feel okay with that.
And I think also a big part of it, and a big part of what I do with people, is about getting people into their bodies and out of their minds. Because when you experience your experience, that the critical eye shuts up for a little while, and you just get to experience what's happening. And you realize, actually, this is quite joyful. This is quite, I'm capable of doing this. And that embodiment in the moment kind of it frees people up, and they're less willing then to go back in there. You become less tolerant of your own bullshit.
Yeah. And it's very hard, because I think our culture pushes everyone to live in that part of the mind, that there's a theory of the brain that over evolution it built up through three parts: the triune brain theory, the reptilian brain, like the oldest part, when we shared a common ancestor with reptiles, the mammalian brain, and then the human thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex at the front, where interestingly, you gestured to when you were talking about the overthinking. I don't know if that was conscious or, but yeah. So yeah, that's very, very accurate. But the older parts of the brain get priority access, which is interesting to know. So the fight or flight part is a really old part of the brain. Otherwise, we wouldn't have got here without it. And that makes the cold another good tool for switching off that overthinking mind.
Yeah.
Because the human part of the brain, the newer part in evolution that worries about what's for dinner later, or that email from your boss yesterday, it loses the access, because when you go into the cold, the fight or flight part, the reptilian part, gets priority. You bypass the thinking mind and you're brought right to the present moment, where, because it's life or death, it's basically bringing your focus to that moment. Because if you are thinking about stupid stuff that's, a week down the line, you could hypothetically, to use this as a bit of an extreme example, like if you were overthinking too long and spent too long in the water, you would, get hypothermia, and that would be bad. So it brings you to the present moment so that you're aware of what's going on and get you out of the way safely. So yeah, it's a really good tool to get people out of that overthinking mind, and like you said, out of the mind, out of that human mind, and into the body, and back deeper into the reptilian brain. And couldn't agree more. There's so much. And I think actually as well, doing that consistently over time, I may be stepping out of my pay grade a little bit here in terms of what I'm talking about, but I've literally heard Wim Hof talk about this once or twice, and it's not really taught in the instructor training course, but I think it's quite a new study, is the chat about blood flow to different parts of the brain. And he mentioned in a recent podcast, actually, about if you're always stuck in that prefrontal cortex, the human thinking part of the brain, that there's like an extra 25% blood flow going to that part of the brain. Whereas if you go to the deeper reptilian part of the brain and put yourself in that fight or flight state in a controlled way, you're actually moving blood flow there and strengthening that part of the brain. So it's easier to go there without having to put yourself in the cold.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've heard of Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory.
Yes.
That's essential. So he's not talking about blood flow. He's talking about the nervous system and the neurons that are actually wired together. But it's those two systems that he's talking about. So the very basic explanation of that is that we do have that primal lizard brain that's just like, I'm going to play dead, or I'm going to fight, or I'm going to run. And then there's the higher mammalian system that achieves safety through contact with other creatures that look like us, essentially, right? So when babies are born, the lizard system, which affects heart rate, breathing, blood flow, the production of adrenaline and cortisol, all of those stress responses has priority, right? Because you want a baby to cry to survive. You want them to be freaked out and to let you know there's something wrong.
Yeah.
But then what should happen is the reptilian system gets activated, the body is flooded with stress, the baby cries, and then a bigger human should come along and give them cuddles and hold them close, and they feel the warmth of the bigger human's skin, and they can regulate their heartbeat with their heartbeat. And they learn that safety is achieved through social contact, eye contact, touch, soothing voices. And so the bigger humans are teaching the mammalian part of the brain to strengthen itself, to wire. So what happens with faulty childhoods is that nurturing doesn't occur, and people are left with that overactive fight or flight response, chronic stress, chronic illness, and anxiety, because there's an evolutionary advantage to being anxious, right? If
Yeah.
there's a threat everywhere, you're going to avoid being eaten.
Yeah, very true. I've heard of that. There's a cognitive bias towards negativity because it'll just keep you safe.
Yeah. So what we're doing is we're retraining the inner lizard by getting better at the things that scare us doesn't happen because we think about it. It happens because we put ourselves in that life or death situation, and our fear system doesn't know the difference between a real tiger that's going to eat us and an imaginary tiger, like going to a party and not knowing anybody, or asking your boss for a pay rise or whatever. It responds the same way no matter what. But by being willing to go there and teaching the lizard that you've got it and that you can handle it through embodied self-awareness and breathing and doing that work, you're reinforcing the mammalian system. Yeah.
Especially like you said with in childhood, that's reinforced by other people, like there's like safety in like soft voice and touch, and if you're getting out of the sea, which is very reptilian, and then have that real mammalian like community and bonding, and a lot of hugs go on after the sea, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I'm sure after the radical honesty, sort of thing as well.
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah. And friendships, very strong friendships, relationships, romantic relationships, people bond because they feel safe, right?
Yeah.
And I noticed that was something that you did in the introductory workshop, the Wim Hof Method introduction. Your voice was very soothing, and you were right there, and you were making lots of eye contact, and you were smiling. So you were actually performing that function while us crazy people were willingly stepping into a bath full of ice, which is insane. But because you were there reinforcing that other system, it allowed us to regulate.
Yeah, that's nice to play the dad role too. Yeah, lots of people in the coming in out of the ice bath. So, no, it's like a real pleasure because, like you said, a lot of people, whether it's through a dysfunctional childhood or whatever, maybe have systems in place that this just allows them to develop maybe a part of themselves that they never got a chance to as a child, and even without realizing it, that's the funniest thing about Dash and Splash. All these amazing things are going on with people in terms of strengthening the nervous system and its ability to come out of stress, and increased cardiovascular fitness through opening and closing the capillaries, and they're doing all these amazing things for themselves and bonding and maybe working on stuff from issues from their childhood, like we just talked about, yet they're all just turning up there for the crack and going for a run and jumping into the sea and not overthinking any of that stuff. It's just happening.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to talk about it. You don't need to read books about it. You don't need to YouTube yourself to death. Just go out and do it. And, and the results are instant. Yeah.
I think that's maybe where story comes back to it as well. Like, If you try to over intellectualize it, like some people are not going to respond to that kind of conversation. Like it's too heavy for a lot of people, and like they're not interested or really want to go to that level of depth of conversation. Some people, like myself, and I'm assuming yourself, find it so fascinating. I'm really interested in that level of things. But I think that's where story comes back into it again, that you don't have to go to that level of conversation. All you really got to do is see like the transformation in other people, and they can share their experience. And honestly, I think like that is an important thing, where like I think that's what they were trying to achieve through like religions and that sort of thing back in the day, that they created story to explain something that had like real psychological significance, and things that probably had real value on a really like reductionist scientific level. But not that they maybe necessarily knew that they were doing this, but it created story that had real benefit for people psychologically. And obviously there's a lot of pros and cons, and you know, a lot of good and bad things about religion, but I think that's what they were trying to do, like use story for things that had psychological value,
Yeah.
whether they realized it or not. And nowadays obviously that's fallen away, and I'm not a person, whilst I would say spirituality is really important for me, I have no organized religion, but it's nice to have something now that you've got experience out there that people have lived, and to share, whether it's my own story or the stories of people who've, you know, been to Dash and Splash or improved to the Wim Hof Method, or say through your therapies, that that have got better, can see the significance of that, follow it themselves, and do a whole lot better too. So I think there's a big importance to that out there, and then sharing through the likes of podcasts.
Yeah, definitely. And I love listening to people's stories, and so I try to share a lot about myself with the people I work with. I'm not this blank canvas. I'm a real person too. I show up with headaches and bad days and grumpy and haven't eaten enough, and that's okay. That's being human. And yeah, I was wondering, for you then, in terms of your own personal journey, I mean, your focus is on health and well-being. The focus is on the physical activity, but how has what you've learned impacted on you as a person, impacted on your personal life? Where is it taking you?
For me, because of where I started in such bad state physical health, that was the initial go-to to address my own personal physical health. And I'd mentioned that I did a really long juice fast, and around the time of starting the juice fast, I'd also booked a trip out to South America to be treated by the plant medicines in Peru. And that was again another example of looking into story and finding out about people who with autoimmune disorders had managed to get better, and that was inspiring to me. So whenever, it was actually one of the things that really helped me stick to the juice fast. Whenever I started the juice fast, I booked the trip to South America, and there was like 6 months in between booking it and going. So I figured before I go to Peru, better do everything I can possible to see if I can make the most out of this trip to South America, because that was expensive and a big investment. So I stuck to the juice fast and ate really cleanly and well, and continued the daily physical activity for whatever it could be for the following 4 months after the juice fast. And I was going out to Peru already basically physically better. Like I wasn't suffering the symptoms. I'd stopped the pharmaceutical drugs that hadn't been working for a couple of years anyway. And Peru was probably the point in my journey where I started to look beyond myself and beyond health, physical health at least anyway. My physical health was more or less in hand. I'd lost like 90% of the weight in 6 months, which is crazy. And I had a chance to work maybe more on my mental health in Peru. And also in Peru, it was the first time in my life I'd been around 20 or so like-minded people who wanted the best for themselves, but each other as well. And literally never had that in my life. Everyone has one or two good friends growing up, or some family
Mm.
around them. I didn't have a particularly big family. And I'd never experienced what it was like to have like 20 odd people who like 20 of your best mates, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, it gave me the inspiration whenever I came back from Peru to do a couple of things. One was not let what had happened with my health end with me. So, I got my own health back, and I wanted to see if I'd greatly improved my life circumstances. I know there's who else wouldn't want to improve their own life circumstances, and I'd learned a thing or two that I might be able to help other people with. And also a bit of where I could put my mind back to whenever I was at that rock bottom point, kind of wished that there was someone who could have been like, oh, just try this thing and that thing. And there wasn't someone that I found at that time. I had to find out things for myself that I might be able to save someone a step in pointing a few people in a few different directions. So I wanted to try and help other people improve their circumstances too, and also get that sense of community that I found in Peru, back home in Ireland. And didn't know how to go about it for a long time. Obviously, as we've talked about, I've managed to still fulfill those intentions now, and I've got a great community of people around me, but it took years. I came back and did a health coaching qualification with the Czech Academy, an American health coach called Paul Czech. His European academies in Lancashire over in England. I went and did a health coaching qualification there, got a piece of paper that says you're a health coach, and didn't know what to do with it. So just sat on that for about a year, just trying out different alternative health things. And it wasn't all just because alternative health things had brought so much to my life. And I wanted to keep investigating that. And whenever I found the Wim Hof Method, that was something that initially it was just for my own benefit, as a tool that had peer-reviewed scientific studies that showed that you could reliably reduce inflammation in the body. As someone who suffered chronic inflammation in the body, I figured that might be a good thing for me to learn. But whenever I started it, it was the first time that I'd found a community of people similar to that I found in Peru, people who wanted the best for themselves, but also the best for each other as well. And then very quickly realized, if this has great health benefits for me and I could teach it, and it's got peer-reviewed scientific studies that you could reliably teach it to another person so that it will 100% work, and then there's also the community aspect to it, then that really ticked both boxes of what I wanted to fulfill. Went and began the process of becoming a Wim Hof Method instructor, and looked beyond that aspect of health, which I feel is personal, community, which is, I guess, like interpersonal, dealing with other people. And then through becoming an instructor and setting up Causeway Living, it's almost beyond personal, or beyond just the interactions, like transpersonal, where it's not just me, it's not just me and another person or a group interacting, but it's to almost come back full circle. It's the culture. It's like what's influencing people beyond just the direct interactions, where people start to become aware, like, oh, the sea swimming thing's good for you, and even if they don't know it's exactly, it just goes out into the world beyond you, beyond the other connections. It's just leaves a legacy, I guess, and that's what I'm trying to do, I guess, with Causeway Living, just influence a more positive culture. And God knows we could do it in today's world, that make it a little bit more positive. So that's the focus.
So if someone is watching us or listening to us, and they're at that beginning stage, they're at that rock bottom stage, or they're just stuck in a rut and they know they're not feeling great, both mentally and physically, usually, what advice would you give them?
Everyone is going to be different, and there's going to be something intuitively that, whether if you're at that rock bottom stage and you've listened to this conversation, there might have been something, if you really think back, that made you think like, oh yeah, or maybe I could do that. Whether it was like going for a walk for 10 minutes, whether it was, oh yeah, I always have wanted to jump in the sea, or oh yeah, I would love to be around like a big group of like-minded people. I think the best bit of advice that I could give to anyone is to really try their hardest to think back over the course of this conversation, or just in general, or maybe other podcasts I've listened to, and find what really jumped out at you as something that sparked your interest or made you feel uplifted, and really try and hold on to that and take the first small step in that direction. If you can like listen to your intuition and take a baby step in that direction, I think that's the best first start. Like for me, you know, I did the big thing, the juice fast, but it was also going for a small walk, and that's a great first step. So if someone is really struggling with even finding something intuitively, just go for a small walk. But if it was the idea of getting outdoors and pushing your comfort zone, come along the Dash and Splash, walk for 30 minutes, watch the swim and see how it goes, hang out with us in the cafe and see all the smiling faces, and you know, you can reassure yourself that it's not a cult, despite the 60 or so green hooded robes on a beach on a Sunday morning in Vancouver.
Yeah, so like the key is start where you're at, start small, and
Start
don't
small.
isolate yourself. Look for the people who are doing the thing that you're interested in, so that you don't feel like you're on your own.
Yeah, 100%. Like go for what feels right to you and
Mhm.
take the smallest step in that direction, I think,
Yeah.
is because it's going to be different for everyone. Somebody is going to really pick up on like, oh yeah, you know what, I could do a little bit of activity each day, or you know, maybe somebody was listening and heard the radical honesty, you know, talking about that and thought like, oh, you know, that could do me a world of good just to, and then you know, maybe they can look into the services you're offering. Everyone will have a different thing intuitively they'll pick up on, and I can't speak highly enough of how that's influenced my own journey. You know, I followed the thing that felt right to me.
Mm-hmm.
And in a world where we're always told to be over analytical and move from, you know, operate from the head, the more you can kind of operate from your heart, as cheesy as that sounds, that it's had a positive impact on my life, at least anyway, and just tried to follow the things intuitively, like the juice fast, like the trip to Peru, like the Wim Hof stuff.
Right. And you have nothing to lose, because like the worst case scenario is you try it and go, oh no, that's not it. I'll try something else.
100%. So then if you try something and it's not for you, then that's just you've still got another 999,900 things. That's just one marked off the list. Just keep trying the next thing.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, I also had a chronic pain. I have endometriosis, and I've been living with that. So that's a fertility issue. It causes a lot of pain and inflammation and internal scarring. And I've been living with that since I was 16. Took me 10 years to get diagnosed. In my 30s, it got really bad because I was living a very high stress, high pressure life. And whenever I live in chronic stress, I get sick, and I feel pain significantly more than when I'm happy and relaxed. And I hit a brick wall with that illness. I was taking time off work all the time. I was off work for about 6 weeks after some surgery. And I was just lying there going, this is not working. This is not, whatever I'm doing is not working. And I don't know shit about shit. I think I'm clever, but clearly I don't have any answers. So I need to trust that other people out there have better answers. So I need to start looking for the people that I admire and try to become that girl. It's not about being smart. It's not about reading books and being clever and being able to say, oh, polyvagal theory, blah, blah, blah. It's about how am I actually living my life, and asking people who I admire, how are you doing this? Can you show me how to do it? So my first thing was yoga. And I often joke that yoga is a bit of a gateway drug. You know, people tend to go to yoga because they've got back pain, or because they're, you know, they've got some sort of illness, or because they're stressed. And it's such an accessible practice. You know, everybody can get on a yoga mat. Everybody can find a yoga class local to them. But once you're in it and you really start to experience the benefit of that, then it opens up so many opportunities into other deeper practices. Not that yoga isn't a deep practice, but for me, I ended up becoming a yoga teacher to deepen that practice. And then alongside that then became the refusal to be dishonest and stressed in my life. So it snowballed, you know, it affected my relationships and the type of friendships I was willing to have. It affected the type of work I was willing to do. And then I found the Radical Honesty community, which then sort of put the physical and the emotional together for me. And in Radical Honesty, we're encouraged to meditate every day, to practice mindful movement, to get into the body, to exercise. And yeah, it snowballed from there. But if you had said to me at 33, this is what your life is going to become, I would have said, what? That's not
And
me.
it started with a yoga class.
Yeah. And so I ended up doing things that on the face of it look quite spiritual, even though, like you, I'm very much science-based. I'm quite a cynic. I like to see evidence for things. I'm a bit resistant to woo, or, you know, people talking in a certain way that sounds a bit fluffy. You know, it's like, yeah, okay, tell me how this actually works. And so I was able to go down that process of, you know, I ended up doing a Vipassana retreat in India, and things that, like, to other people look so hippie and so out there, but I because I took that small step, I ended up meeting other people who said, oh, I think you would really like this, or have you ever thought of that? And so for me, the Vipassana retreat, that was like, you know, 13 hours a day in the boiling Indian heat, sitting still, just noticing my sensations. And it just so happened that week I had a really bad endometriosis flare up, and I was literally sitting on my cushion with tears rolling down my face, and I was taking super strong painkillers, and I was determined I was not going to give up, because everybody else was not giving up. I wasn't giving up. But the reptile was saying, you need to get out of here. This is not good. You are in a lot of pain. What are you doing? And after like the third day, I made this amazing realization, because you're encouraged to, you know, scan your body from top to bottom and then come back up again. And so I was going, nothing, 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 ow, 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 nothing, 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 ow, 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 no, 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 right? And so I was like, I wasn't noticing any subtle sensations at all. And I realized I wasn't noticing any subtle sensations because I was taking these crazy painkillers, which were killing sensation in my body. The signals were not getting through. So I was left with just the most extreme experience, which was pain. And that was my existence. So I made what felt like a really risky decision to stop taking my painkillers and to show up on the cushion the next day, free from drugs completely. And that terrified me, because I've been taking drugs since I was 16, and I did that retreat when I was 38. So I felt really dependent on them. And the next morning I got on to my cushion and I sat there, and it was like, itchy nose. Oh, breeze on my shoulder. Ow, 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 ow. My knee's numb. Oh, my toe is itchy. And suddenly all of these other things were happening. I had this broader sense of myself. So I could be in pain, but I could also experience pleasure at the same time. Like, oh, that breeze on my cheek is lovely. Or, be kind of curious about what it feels like when you allow your foot to fall asleep and go completely dead. And what does it feel like to not have a foot anymore, while also being in pain? So it didn't, it wasn't, I'm just this. And in order to be happy, I have to be free from this. It was like I was allowed to let it all in. And that that was a really powerful experience. And I don't know if I would have had that experience had I not had all those other experiences first, and found that community who was able to say, try it out. I did this thing. It
Yeah,
was pretty cool.
that's amazing. Like, and that's such a big realization as well, that that only does come, I think, from creating a little bit of space away from being totally absorbed in the thinking mind. That, like,
Yeah.
if you can step back from the thinking mind and see all the other things that are also happening at the same time, that was a big thing for me as well, understanding that you could still be in pain or still have one part of your life that might be a disaster, depending on how you look at it. But you could also have a lot of other good things going on at the same time. Actually, that was something that came up for me on one of the Wim Hof experiences, like in the teacher course, that they really pushed everyone's limits, and obviously, understandably, to make sure that you really embody the practice, and you can deal with some of the bigger extremes, and the understanding that deep within the cold and like a freezing 2-degree snow melt water rushing by you for in a 10 minutes in there, and feeling physically not pleasant in the slightest, but not to allow that to become your whole reality, and realize, like, oh yeah, I've got all these cool people around me, and we're going to go back to the hotel afterwards and have a great time. And even though I feel terrible physically in this moment, there's still all these other amazing things going on, right now. And yeah, that's a great understanding. And even better still to look back to where you got that, started a yoga class. So for anyone listening to this, like, if they listen to that, and even to take a step further back than that, what you did, looking to people that inspired you, and then I guess it comes back to that intuition thing again. That must have been something you felt like, oh, this will be good for me, this is something that all these people do. And it's amazing what one intuitive action can lead to, and ultimately a conversation like this.
yeah And I think the key is that doing this work doesn't mean that you no longer suffer. Right. Even Wim Hof says he hates the cold. He doesn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
Real contentedness and feeling like you have your shit together is knowing that suffering happens. It's part of human life. It's part of everyday life, but you can handle it. You have skills, and you have a community that you can rely on to get through the tough bits, that you're resilient.
Cold's a really good tool for that, actually. Like, going into the sea, I remember even saying to someone recently, somebody was having a hard time with it, and generally, like, everyone deals with the cold differently. Some people take to it super easy and naturally, and maybe it's people that have been through a lot of stuff before. Some people have a harder time, and that's totally fine as well. And I remember sort of walking in with someone after everyone else was already in the sea at Dash and Splash, and they're saying, oh yeah, but my feet are really sore, and like, kind of explaining to them that you're fine, it's only pain. Like, even if you're not in any direct danger, that this is not hurting, you're not damaging yourself. If you experience like some discomfort in the cold, that's all that is. Just walk on into it and learn that that's okay.
Yeah. And that's something that I say on a nearly daily basis. Like, this is just sensations, you're just experiencing sensations, and that's okay.
Yeah. So great tools for that, and important to know. And the point, I guess the bigger point is it's not to do with the cold or like accepting the cold. It's the bigger implications in your day-to-day life. So when the nasty email comes, or that's taking, the horrible bill that's looming over you, to accept that, okay, this is unpleasant, but it doesn't like completely color in your whole world, that like you can almost compartmentalize that a little bit, and not that you're burying your head in the sand, like, appreciate that it's still there and still needs to be dealt with, but it doesn't need to ruin your life. And the fact that you could, because then all of a sudden, that impacts, if that becomes your world, that one bad thing becomes your world, it affects your sleep. And then if you're not sleeping well, you feel tired and grumpy, and it comes back to this whole momentum thing that we've touched on a few times, that can throw you way out of whack. So
Right.
giving it the space and compartmentalizing it a little bit can allow you to continue to do the good things for yourself. I think that will ultimately make you your best self and the most capable you to deal with that bad thing as best as
Right.
possible.
Yeah. I would suggest it's not compartmentalizing, because usually compartmentalizing involves denial. What you're actually doing is you're broadening the scope of your awareness to include that, but lots of other things too. You become more whole, more kind of dynamic as a person. So you're not just that Bill.
Yeah.
And then all of the stories that you tell yourself about not being good with money, and that you should have your shit together, and resentful for somebody wasting the immersion, and you don't fixate. You are bigger than just that one thing.
That's a better way of looking at it, that instead of like focusing directly on that thing, rather than boxing it off and boxing lots of other things off, and shifting the awareness to all of them at different times. Maybe that's a better way of thinking about it, is just to open your awareness to see all of it at the same time.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the key.
Yeah. So exciting to have all these tools, and to know that there's other people out there on the same path and sharing this stuff, because God knows I could have really done with that a few years ago, and still can do. I'm still everything I'm teaching now is stuff I'm using myself as well. Sometimes whenever I'm putting out a post on social media, I'm writing it for myself. If anyone else can benefit from it, then that's great. But I'm usually the one that needs to hear it as much as anyone.
Too. Yeah. The things I post are usually really relevant to what's going on in my life. You don't have to be a super sleuth to figure that out. So one of the questions I've been asking people, I'm aware that the sun has just arrived and I've become very white, but I just have to deal with it. One of the things I ask people towards the end of our conversation is, do you consider yourself an ordinary badass? And if so, why?
100%. Yeah. I couldn't be more ordinary. And I think we've touched on a lot of that in the conversation, right up to the point there where, all the stuff that I'm teaching and talking about is all the stuff that I'm going through myself, and the stuff that I need to hear, that everyone's going through. And the fact that what I do continues to grow all the time and gets such great interaction and engagement, and speaks to me that people relate to that. So I guess it's very ordinary to be going through all those things. And I would 100% say that I've lived enough experiences to be a certified badass. Climbing to 60 days without solid food was pretty badass, and going to the jungle to be treated by the plant medicines and all the carry-on that went with that, and climbing to the top of a snowy mountain in like just a pair of shorts as part of the Wim Hof training. That's all certifiable badass qualifications. But also bringing that into the ordinary, it's not just about those big experiences. It's easy to look at those things and think, well, it's a badass thing to do, but the real badass things to do are all about consistency and the smaller steps. And if you can take those big experiences and bring them into the daily life. So, even just to use that example, we've talked about the cold stuff a lot because it relates to what I work towards, but you don't have to, you're going to get more benefits out of doing a regular cold shower or going down to the sea regularly than climbing to the top of a mountain in shorts and boots and a hat, once. That might seem like the badass thing to do, but it's actually more badass to be going down to the sea regularly, which might be as cold, but doing it consistently over time is even tougher. And
it's integrating it into your everyday life and making it part of your life that makes it really badass.
Exactly.
Even when you don't feel like it.
Yes, 100%. And that's why keeping those people around you and having conversations like this is just going to make that even easier. So
Yeah, you don't have to do it on your own.
And it doesn't have to be a cult if people are people are encouraging
Yeah,
it.
I think all these crazy nut jobs have the monopoly on cults, but I think there's room for nice cults, right?
I don't want this to be the outing of Causeway living as a cult. I'm not ready for that. So we'll stick with not a cult for now.
Not a cult.
Maybe
Just nice people who are taking chances and feeling alive with each other. And
100%. That sounds way more marketable.
Okay. So if people want to find out more about you and Causeway Living and get involved, where should they go or what should they do?
It's all very easy, causewayliving.com, or all the social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, are all /Causeway Living.
Okay.
So you can find all of the fun stuff on there. All the events are listed most easily in one place, probably in the Facebook page. There's like a little events section there, or if people go to the website, they can look at the different events and see the times and dates. But every Sunday, should also add that Dash and Splash is a free event, so there's no barrier towards just coming down and checking it out and see what the crack is with it. A lot of people do come down and kind of quietly watch from a distance and then see how much fun it is and get involved. But yeah, it's possible to find out online or just come along to one of the free events and watch, and hopefully see some of the people listening to this or watching this there in the future.
Yeah, great. So thank you, Scott. We don't know each other that well, but I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope to get to know you much better. You're somebody that I do admire. I think you're doing really, really great work. I wish you all success possible with all of it. Any way I can help.
Likewise, and I think we know each other even better now.
Yeah. So you might see me on the beach in Bangor some Sunday.
Happy days. Thanks again for the chat.
Yeah, okay. And thank you all for listening and watching, and I will look forward to seeing you again. If you enjoyed this podcast, head over to ordinarybadass.com and get more inspiration. Sign up for my webinars and courses, and continue the conversation by joining our Ordinary Badass community.